both the Trump economy and the president's war. In the News Center, talking about all of this with us this afternoon, our NewsNation political contributor, Denise Gitsham, and also the political commentator, Reese Colbert. Thank you both. Denise, go ahead, start us off on this with the Axios interview and kind of standing out in a lot of people's minds. But what he said there is what we knew already, because he kept saying it over and over the other day. People would ask him about, why'd you do, why'd you make this deal? Why'd you make this deal? And I want to be Herbert Hoover. I mean, there's nothing more to it than that. He didn't want to see the market go down and the economy be in trouble.
And the markets haven't gone down, right? And so those who have any sort of stock holdings, I mean, they're gaining wealth even as prices rise. And this is a dichotomy the president has to fix. I think all Americans should be focused on this issue. This is something Reese and I am sure will be in violent agreement on. And that's that prices have to come down. Any politician that's not talking about what we're doing for the American people to make things affordable is fully missing the mark. I don't care what side of the aisle you're on. That has to be our focus. And I'm grateful that the president is hopefully moving on from this Iran conflict so he can focus on what matters most, which is taking care of the people he was elected to take care of.
Well, that's where the oil price comes in. And it seemed, because the thing, Reese, we were running low on oil. And we did the story a bunch of times that the oil stockpiles were going down. And we'd have like an oil analyst or some other expert come on and say, you better watch out midsummer, July or August. This could be a real problem. Obviously, if we're having those conversations, so is the president. And he cut this deal. Not necessarily, I don't think, because it was a great deal, but because he wanted to, as he just said, avoid catastrophe. That's the issue on prices. Now what, Reese?
Well, yeah, I think that, first of all, I am in violent agreement with Denise on this one. But the reality is that President Trump has gotten very lucky. The markets have reacted in a very optimistic way that this war would be short-lived and it would be minimally disruptive. It's probably been more disruptive than what it has been priced in already. But I think patience was absolutely running out because of the oil stock supplies and a number of other factors. I don't think that this deal necessarily solves the issue of vessels slowly trickling through the Strait of Hormuz. As your previous segment just pointed out, it doesn't solve the insurance issues that will make people less likely or more hesitant to ship through the Strait of Hormuz. It doesn't solve a number of issues. But what Trump is pretty good at is at reframing things, at selling a deal as being much better than what it is. But the proof will be in the pudding, and the pudding is the price.
Yeah, and the proof will be if those ships actually start to move, right. and there are real questions about that today. The other thing that stands out, obviously, and it's getting a lot of attention, Denise, from Mark's interview, is this idea that the president does not see any limit on his power. Here's that exchange with Mark Caputo of Axios. Take a listen.
What have you learned about not just the exercise of power, but the limits on your power as a result of the conflict?
There are no limits.
No,
I haven't learned that lesson yet. I know there are, but there are no limits. We defeated them totally militarily.
He goes into Iran there, but I actually thought that one phrase was a little bit interesting, Denise, when he said, "I haven't learned that lesson yet." I know there are, but I don't see limits.
Well, he might very soon. I think that he's learning that sometimes having no limits to the power means that you're given enough rope to hang yourself. And hopefully that doesn't happen, because if that happens, that's going to reflect poorly on the future of Americans, right? And the reality is, politically and practically, President Trump has no limits because nobody's imposed any. Republicans and Democrats, they've tried to resist, but there's really not some sort of organized effort to stop President Trump on either side of the aisle, because Democrats are fighting amongst themselves. And if you look at what's happening in the polls, President Trump keeps getting headlines for having record low approval ratings. But the reality is, if you look at congressional Democrats and congressional Republicans, they're leagues below where President Trump is in terms of approval. So practically speaking, he still has more political support from the American public than either congressional Democrats or congressional Republicans.
Yeah, Congress is always up there with the used car dealers and probably maybe the reporters, two of them. But the idea, though, that the Democrats, I get it that they're unpopular, Reese, but they also didn't and still don't have the votes necessarily to fight back, whereas the Republicans now are starting to flex a little bit of muscle, uncharacteristically so. We've done this story as well. The Wall Street Journal had one this morning where they had the quote, "I'm the president and you're not," and talked about how President Trump is testing his power and frustrating fellow Republicans. He apparently delivered the same retort to political allies who've offered him strategic advice in recent weeks. This is according to the Journal's reporting, and that's the quote, "I'm the president and and you're not. But again, to Denise's earlier point, there might be limits there too if the Republicans choose to impose them.
Well, it does wonders losing your primaries. And so when you have more Republican senators who will no longer be in office next year, then you're starting to see a little bit of shift in the willingness to stand up to Donald Trump. But I think that Donald Trump has not seen any limits in terms of consequences. His power in terms of being able to affect the kind of change that he's claiming he wants to make has obviously been very limited. But when you don't pay for getting convicted of 34 felonies, when you get to rewrite an insurrection, when you get charges that are dropped, when you don't have to pay your civil judgments for fraud and a number of things, then I would understand why he would tend to believe that there are no limits to his power.
Let me do one more, and that's Israel. Okay, Denise? So let me play a clip from Trump, again, in the Axios interview about what he says about his role with Israel. Then we'll look at polling that digs into this. But here's the exchange on Israel.
If it weren't for Donald Trump, Israel would have been eviscerated.
Your relationship with Netanyahu's
It's good, but we have to keep him a little bit sane.
Are you going to be able to control Israel from attacking Lebanon?
Yeah, I will be. I mean,
How?
I wonder. They have a lot of respect for me, and they do as I say.
Do as I say. Now, it's kind of interesting, Denise, to me, to look at the polling that we were, as you said, the presidency overall and approval at 37% of this AP polling, and the economy, Iran. Israel's not much off of the norm here. None of these are good numbers, but this is the Israel number that you see here. It's 64% disapproval, okay? But I guess what I'm saying is it's not out. It's not out of bounds with the other numbers that we're looking at. Day after we heard the vice president say that Israel only has one friend, it's President Trump, and those comments don't necessarily seem like they're, best friends.
Again, you could hate what he says, but he's still not wrong. The United States is still Israel's strongest ally, and probably its only ally internationally. If you look at how the UN's going, I mean, none of the Western countries in Europe are still aligning with Israel. And, that's okay. I mean, that's Israel's prerogative. We're not Israel. And I think President Trump is responding to the America First contingent of our party, which says,
Right.
You know what? I'm not sure that I'm comfortable with how cozy you are with Netanyahu. And Netanyahu isn't doing anything to help himself on the global PR front. Neither the president nor Bibi have come together and made a case that's strong. And honestly, I'm not sure that they're even able to at this point. To be clear, I completely stand for Israel's right to protect its sovereignty. I do not believe that Hezbollah in its one-way war of aggression on Israel's northern border is okay. I don't believe in terrorism. I don't think any Americans do on any side of the aisle. But at the same time, Bibi could be so much smarter in how he brings the world along and really helps people understand beyond his borders, beyond just his domestic leaders and his own people, why this is such an important fight, not just for Israel and its right to exist, but actually for stability in the region and to prevent a World War III from kicking off.
I think that's pretty much the way the president sees it from his recent comments.
Yeah.
Denise and Reese, we're actually going to hear more from both of you later on in the show. So thank you, and we'll be back.